The dust of the promised land settled on Joshua's sandals, a tangible symbol of a promise years in the making, yet a promise still held just beyond reach. For 40 years, the Israelites had wandered, a generation marked by doubt and disobedience, their faith a flickering ember in the vast wilderness. Now, under Joshua's leadership, they stood on the precipice of Canaan, the land flowing with milk and honey, a land also fortified by formidable walls and fiercely defended peoples. The air thrummed with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The weight of a nation's destiny rested on Joshua's shoulders, a burden he carried not with the arrogance of a conqueror, but with the humble resolve of a servant. He had walked with Moses, had seen the divine power that had parted seas and rained down manna, yet the task before him, the conquest of Jericho, felt like a mountain that even divine intervention might struggle to move. Jericho, a city whose name echoed with the strength of its ramparts, stood as the first, and perhaps most daunting, obstacle. Its very presence seemed to mock the Israelites' long journey, a stark reminder of their vulnerability and the immense challenge that lay ahead. This was not merely a military campaign, it was a spiritual crucible, a test designed to forge a new generation of believers, one that would learn to trust not in chariots and swords, but in the unshakable power of the Almighty. The problem was not merely physical. The walls of Jericho were more than stone and mortar, they were a psychological barrier, a testament to human strength that seemed insurmountable. For the Israelites, accustomed to the harsh realities of the desert, these cities represented a power far beyond their own. Their recent memories were filled with the echoes of their ancestors' failures, a constant reminder of the consequences of straying from God's path. Joshua, though chosen and empowered, felt the sting of this legacy. He understood that true victory would not come from strategic brilliance or superior force, but from an absolute, unwavering adherence to divine instruction. This was the unique angle of this particular script. It would not focus on the might of Israel, but on the profound testament to faith and obedience. It would explore how a seemingly impossible command, when met with absolute trust, could dismantle the strongest of human defenses. The reader, perhaps grappling with their own seemingly insurmountable challenges, would find a resonance here, a reminder that the greatest victories are often born not from our own strength, but from our willingness to surrender to a higher power. Joshua looked out at the imposing walls, a city that had stood for centuries, a symbol of enduring human achievement and defiance. The people of Jericho were not merely inhabitants, they were a people who had long enjoyed the fruits of their labor, protected by formidable defenses, confident in their own strength. They represented the established order, the entrenched power that the Israelites, a nomadic people, were now called to overcome. The contrast was stark, the seasoned warriors of Jericho, secure within their city, and the Israelites, a people whose strength was not in their numbers or their training, but in their covenant with God. This narrative would delve into the heart of that covenant, exploring what it truly meant to obey when obedience seemed to defy all logic and common sense. It would examine the internal struggles of Joshua and his people, the whispers of doubt that would inevitably arise, and the unwavering resolve that would be required to press forward. The stakes were immense, not just the conquest of a city, but the very foundation of a nation's future, a future built on a bedrock of faith. The journey to this point had been long and arduous, a testament to God's patience and his enduring love for his people. From the Exodus, a miraculous escape from Egyptian bondage, to the wilderness wanderings, a period of purification and testing, each step had been guided by divine providence. Now, at the cusp of their inheritance, a final, profound lesson awaited. The conquest of Jericho was not simply about claiming territory, it was about demonstrating a radical dependence on God, a willingness to believe in the impossible. This script would illuminate that process, showcasing how faith, when coupled with absolute obedience, could achieve what human might never could. It would be a story of a divine strategy, a plan so unconventional that it would challenge the very notions of warfare and conquest. The reader would be invited to witness not just the fall of a city, but the profound transformation of a people, a transformation that began with a single, unwavering act of trust in the unseen. The silence before the command was broken by the rustling of tents and the murmur of a people poised on the edge of destiny. The sun beat down on the plains before Jericho, a stark reminder of the arid landscape that had been their home for so long. Yet, here, the promise of a fertile land was tangible, a verdant oasis guarded by an unyielding fortress. The challenge was clear: break down the walls, conquer the city, and claim the inheritance. But the how was shrouded in mystery, a question that hung heavy in the air, waiting for the divine answer. This was the moment of truth, where faith would be tested not by hardship, but by an instruction that would seem to fly in the face of all military wisdom. The narrative would unfold this divine strategy, revealing a path to victory that was unconventional, unexpected, and utterly dependent on the unwavering obedience of God's chosen people. It would be a testament to the fact that true strength lies not in the power we wield, but in the willingness to submit to a power far greater than our own. The spies returned, their reports a chilling confirmation of the city's formidable defenses. The walls of Jericho, they declared, were immense, reaching towards the heavens, and its people were strong, their warriors seasoned and their spirits unbroken. Fear, a familiar companion to the Israelites in the wilderness, began to stir once more. They had seen God's mighty hand in the past, had witnessed miracles that defied human understanding, yet the sheer scale of Jericho's fortifications seemed to present a challenge unlike any they had faced before. Joshua, though a seasoned leader who had guided them through countless trials, felt the immense pressure of this moment. He had inherited the mantle of leadership from Moses, a man who had walked and spoken with God, and now, he too was called to listen to the divine voice. The weight of expectation, the hopes of an entire nation, rested upon his ability to discern and to act upon God's will, even when that will seemed to defy all logic and earthly wisdom. This was the beginning of a test, a profound examination of faith that would go far beyond the battlefield. The divine instruction came not as a thunderous command, but as a quiet, persistent whisper in Joshua's heart, a direction that seemed almost absurd to the seasoned military mind. He was to lead the people, not in a direct assault, but in a procession. For 6 days, they were to march around the city, a silent, solemn circuit, led by the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant, the tangible symbol of God's presence among them. They were to be accompanied by 7 priests, each bearing a ram's horn, and on the 7th day, they were to march around the city 7 times, at which point the priests were to blow the horns, and the people were to shout. This was not warfare as they knew it, it was a display of faith, a public declaration of their reliance on a power that transcended human might. The strategy was so counterintuitive, so seemingly passive, that it would inevitably sow seeds of doubt and confusion among the ranks. Joshua, however, understood that this was not about strategy, it was about obedience, about demonstrating an absolute trust in the God who had brought them this far. The Ark, a sacred chest housing the very covenant between God and his people, was to be at the forefront of this unusual procession. Its presence was a constant reminder of God's intimate involvement in their journey, a visible manifestation of his power. The priests, robed in their sacred garments, would carry it with reverence, their steps measured and deliberate. Surrounding them would be the men of war, their weapons silent, their faces set in a mixture of solemnity and perhaps, a nascent hope. The Ark's journey around Jericho was not a march of conquest, but a procession of faith, a declaration that God himself was leading them, that the battle belonged to him. This would be the visible sign, the tangible proof of their commitment to the divine plan, a plan that was unfolding in ways that would challenge every preconceived notion of how victory was achieved. The silence of the march was as potent as any war cry, a testament to the power of patient, unwavering trust. The days that followed were a trial in themselves. Each morning, as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the parched earth, the Israelites would assemble. The priests would take up the ark, the trumpets would be readied, and the solemn procession would begin. They would walk, step by measured step, around the mighty walls of Jericho. The city, from its ramparts, would watch, perhaps with a mixture of contempt and bewilderment. Their own warriors, armed and ready, would stand by, their confidence undiminished by the strange spectacle unfolding before them. For the Israelites, this was an exercise in discipline, a test of their resolve. They were not to speak, not to shout, not to let any sound escape their lips save for the rhythmic cadence of their marching feet and the occasional, distant bleating of the rams destined for sacrifice. This was a silent sermon, a powerful demonstration of faith in action, a testament to the fact that God's ways were not man's ways, and his strength was made perfect in weakness. As the days wore on, the initial bewilderment of the Israelites began to give way to a deeper understanding. They saw that this was not about their own strength or strategy, but about God's power. The repeated circuits around the city were not a futile exercise, but a spiritual discipline, a way of internalizing the promise, of allowing the divine instruction to permeate their very being. Each step was a declaration of faith, a silent acknowledgement that the victory would not be won by human might, but by divine intervention. Joshua, at the head of the procession, his gaze fixed on the distant walls, embodied this unwavering trust. He had received the command, and he would carry it out with every fiber of his being, trusting that God's plan, however unconventional, was the only path to true victory. The silence of the march was a profound prayer, a testament to the power of a people united in faith and obedience. The seventh day dawned with a palpable sense of anticipation. The air was thick with unspoken prayers and a collective holding of breath. This was the culmination, the moment when the divine strategy would be put to its ultimate test. The priests, their faces etched with a solemn resolve, lifted the Ark of the Covenant. The 7 rams' horns, held aloft by their designated bearers, gleamed in the morning sun. The procession began, the familiar, measured steps echoing on the dusty ground. But this time, there was a difference. As they completed the first circuit, and then the second, and the third, the air began to crackle with an energy that was almost tangible. The silence was no longer just an absence of noise, it was a charged stillness, pregnant with the promise of imminent divine action. Joshua, his heart pounding with a mixture of awe and expectation, knew that this was the moment. As the procession completed its 6th circuit, a hush fell over the entire Israelite host. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long, dramatic shadows across the plain. This was the final act, the moment of truth. Joshua, his voice resonating with divine authority, signaled the end of the silence. He raised his hand, a gesture that commanded the attention of every soul present. Then, he gave the command, a single, powerful word that echoed across the plain, a word that would unleash the power of God upon the mighty walls of Jericho. The 7 priests, their lips pressed against the ram's horns, took a deep, collective breath. The sound that erupted was unlike anything ever heard before, a deafening, piercing blast that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. It was a sound that spoke of judgment, of deliverance, of a power that could crumble the strongest of human defenses. The blast of the horns was a signal, a divine cue. As the prolonged, sustained note reverberated through the air, Joshua commanded the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And they shouted. A great, unified roar rose from the throats of hundreds of thousands of Israelites, a sound of triumph, of faith unleashed, of a destiny finally realized. It was a sound that carried not just the force of human voices, but the power of a divine promise fulfilled. The walls of Jericho, which had stood for centuries, a symbol of impenetrable strength, began to tremble. The earth beneath their feet quaked, and a deep, guttural groan emanated from the very stones. With a deafening roar, the massive walls, one by one, crumbled and fell, collapsing into heaps of rubble, leaving the city exposed and vulnerable. The impossible had happened, not through the might of an army, but through the unwavering faith and absolute obedience of a people who had dared to trust in the unseen. The sight that greeted the Israelites was one of utter devastation, yet also of profound victory. The mighty walls of Jericho lay in ruins, a testament to the power of God's command. The city, once a symbol of impregnable strength, was now laid bare, its defenses shattered. A wave of awe washed over the assembled host, a realization of the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. This was not merely the conquest of a city, it was a divine demonstration, a powerful lesson etched into the very fabric of their history. Joshua, standing amidst the fallen stones, felt a profound sense of humility and gratitude. He had led them, yes, but the victory belonged to the Lord. The obedience of his people, their willingness to trust in a plan that defied all logic, had paved the way for this miraculous outcome. The path ahead would still be challenging, but the foundation had been laid, a foundation built not on human strength, but on the unshakable rock of faith. The aftermath of Jericho's fall was a period of solemn reflection and careful execution of divine commands. The city, once a bastion of paganism and defiance, was now under Israelite control. However, the spoils of war were not to be treated as ordinary plunder. God had ordained a specific course of action, a testament to his desire for holiness and separation from the practices of the nations they were dispossessing. The command was clear: everything in the city was to be devoted to the Lord. Gold, silver, bronze, and iron were to be brought into the treasury of the Lord's house. However, the people were warned against taking anything for themselves. This was a crucial distinction, a reinforcement of the principle that this victory was not for personal gain, but for the glory of God and the establishment of his kingdom. Achan, a man whose name would forever be associated with the consequences of disobedience, would soon learn the harsh reality of defying God's explicit instructions. The conquest of Jericho marked a pivotal moment in the Israelites' journey into the Promised Land. It was a testament to the power of faith and obedience, a lesson that would resonate throughout their history. The fall of the walls was not an isolated event, but the beginning of a new era, one where the Israelites were called to live according to God's commands, to be a people set apart. Joshua, now firmly established as their leader, understood the profound responsibility that lay before him. He had witnessed firsthand the power of divine intervention, and he was committed to leading his people in a way that honored God and upheld his covenant. The initial success at Jericho, while monumental, was just the first step in a long and challenging campaign to fully establish Israel in the land God had promised them. The legacy of this victory would serve as a constant reminder of what could be achieved when faith and obedience were united. The memory of the crumbling walls and the deafening shouts became a cornerstone of Israelite identity. It was a story passed down through generations, a powerful narrative that underscored the importance of trusting in God's plan, even when it seemed impossible. The fall of Jericho was more than just a military victory, it was a spiritual awakening, a demonstration that the God of Israel was supreme, capable of overcoming any obstacle. Joshua, having fulfilled the initial command, continued to lead with wisdom and integrity, always seeking to honor God's will. The subsequent campaigns would bring new challenges, new enemies, and new tests of faith, but the lesson learned at Jericho would serve as an enduring beacon, guiding them through the complexities of establishing their nation. The legacy of that obedience was etched not only in the ruins of Jericho but in the hearts and minds of a people who had learned to walk by faith, not by sight. The return from Jericho was not a return to the familiar comforts of the wilderness, but a transition into a new reality, a reality shaped by divine promise and the hard-won victory. The Israelites, no longer a wandering people, were now tasked with occupying and governing the land God had given them. This required more than just military prowess, it demanded a deep spiritual commitment, a willingness to live by God's laws and to establish a society that reflected His righteousness. Joshua, as the appointed leader, bore the immense responsibility of guiding them in this new phase. He understood that the victory over Jericho was not an end in itself, but a crucial beginning, a demonstration of God's power that would embolden them for the tasks ahead. The elixir they carried back was not material wealth, but the profound understanding that with God, all things are possible, a truth that would sustain them through all future trials. The immediate aftermath of Jericho's collapse presented a stark divergence from conventional conquest. Instead of a chaotic scramble for spoils, a rigorous adherence to divine decree was paramount. The sacred ark, having served as the catalyst for the city's downfall, now presided over a meticulous inventory. Every object, from the smallest coin to the most ornate vessel, was subject to God's judgment. This was not about enrichment, it was about purification, a radical act of separating the holy from the profane. Imagine a craftsman meticulously sorting precious metals from dross, not to discard the dross, but to consecrate it entirely to a higher purpose. This principle extended to the very people of Jericho. While the land was to be Israel's inheritance, its inhabitants, steeped in idolatry, were to be eradicated. This was a difficult, perhaps even disturbing, command to comprehend from a human perspective, yet it underscored the absolute nature of God's claim over the land and His desire for His people to live in unadulterated devotion. Consequently, the focus shifted from the physical dismantling of fortifications to the spiritual cleansing of the land. The Israelites were not merely replacing one ruler with another, they were establishing a new spiritual order, one founded on the exclusive worship of the one true God. This involved a profound act of discernment, a conscious decision to reject the pervasive idolatry that characterized Canaanite society. Consider the analogy of a gardener diligently removing invasive weeds that threaten to choke out the intended crop. The weeds must be eradicated, not out of malice, but to ensure the healthy growth of what is meant to flourish. This principle applied to the Israelites' spiritual cultivation in their new homeland. Their obedience in this matter was a direct testament to their commitment to the covenant, demonstrating that their faith was not a passive belief, but an active, demanding way of life that required unwavering adherence to divine directives, even those that challenged their immediate understanding or comfort. Furthermore, the incident involving Achan brought to light a critical facet of this post-conquest phase, the pervasive threat of internal compromise. While the external enemy had been vanquished, the insidious lure of forbidden gains posed a significant danger to the nation's spiritual integrity. Achan's covetous gaze fell upon a Babylonian garment, silver, and gold, items explicitly declared as devoted to the Lord. His act of clandestine appropriation was not merely theft, it was a betrayal of the covenant, a direct defiance of God's command. This transgression had immediate and severe repercussions, not just for Achan and his family, but for the entire Israelite community, leading to defeat in their next engagement at Ai. This underscores a vital truth: spiritual purity is not an abstract ideal, but a practical necessity for sustained divine favor and success in the endeavors God ordains. Building on this, the narrative highlights that a nation's spiritual health is inextricably linked to its collective actions and individual integrity. The success at Jericho was a triumph of corporate faith, a unified movement driven by divine instruction. Conversely, the setback at Ai was a stark illustration of how a single act of disobedience could unravel the fabric of collective blessing. This is akin to a single faulty wire in a complex electrical system that can cause a widespread outage. The Israelites learned, through painful experience, that individual choices carried communal weight, particularly when those choices involved a direct disregard for God's explicit mandates. This realization necessitated a heightened sense of personal accountability and a renewed commitment to upholding the sanctity of the covenant in every aspect of their lives, both public and private. Another crucial layer is the establishment of a precedent for future generations. The thoroughness with which Jericho was dealt with, including the strictures regarding its inhabitants and possessions, set a clear standard for subsequent conquests. It communicated that the Promised Land was not merely a territory to be occupied, but a sacred space to be consecrated to God. This involved a deliberate and often difficult process of dislodging existing cultural and religious practices that were antithetical to the covenant. The Israelites were not simply to coexist with the Canaanites, they were to ensure that the land became a testament to the one true God. This involved a proactive approach to spiritual governance, ensuring that the religious and moral landscape of their nation was shaped by divine law, not by the syncretistic tendencies that often arise when cultures collide. The subsequent engagement at Ai, following the stringent purification of Jericho, served as a harsh but necessary pedagogical tool, demonstrating the far-reaching consequences of even a single act of defiance. This was not merely a punitive measure, it was a crucial lesson in the interconnectedness of obedience and divine favor. The Israelites, having experienced the overwhelming power of God in demolishing Jericho's walls, might have reasonably assumed that their subsequent military endeavors would be similarly effortless. However, the unexpected rout at Ai shattered this assumption, revealing a critical truth: God's power was not an inexhaustible resource to be tapped at will, but a conditional blessing, contingent upon the nation's sustained adherence to his covenant. Now, consider how this applies when you face a challenge that seems straightforward, yet you find yourself inexplicably struggling. It prompts a deep internal examination, a search for hidden compromises or unaddressed areas of disobedience in your own life or community. The discovery of Achan's transgression and his subsequent judgment underscored the principle of corporate responsibility within the Israelite theocracy. His hidden sin had brought shame and defeat not just upon himself and his household, but upon the entire nation. This wasn't a system of arbitrary punishment, but a reflection of the profound unity of the covenant community. Imagine a finely tuned orchestra where a single discordant note, played by one musician, can disrupt the harmony of the entire ensemble. Achan's actions were that discordant note, disrupting the symphony of divine blessing that had been meticulously orchestrated at Jericho. The subsequent cleansing, though severe, was essential to restore the nation's spiritual equilibrium and re-establish their right standing before God, thereby paving the way for renewed success. This highlights the importance of accountability within any collective endeavor, emphasizing that the integrity of the whole depends on the integrity of its parts. Furthermore, the strategic reassessment and subsequent successful conquest of Ai, after the initial setback, illustrated the process of learning and adaptation under divine guidance. The reconnaissance mission that identified the city's vulnerability, the tactical deployment of an ambush force, and the coordinated assault all demonstrated a renewed understanding of warfare guided by heavenly wisdom. This was not simply a matter of learning from mistakes, it was about discerning God's will in the context of evolving circumstances. The initial approach to Ai had been based on a flawed assumption of continued, unhindered divine intervention, whereas the revised strategy incorporated human agency and tactical planning, all undertaken with a spirit of dependence on God. This is analogous to a navigator adjusting their course based on changing wind patterns, still aiming for the same destination but adapting their methods to the prevailing conditions, always with an eye on the ultimate goal. Moreover, the narrative subtly introduces the concept of proportionality in divine justice. While Achan's sin was grave and its consequences immediate, the overall narrative arc emphasizes restoration rather than perpetual condemnation. The Israelites were not left to languish in defeat. Instead, they were equipped with the knowledge and understanding necessary to overcome their subsequent challenges. This demonstrates that divine discipline, while firm, is ultimately redemptive, aimed at correcting and refining rather than simply destroying. Think of a skilled sculptor who chips away excess stone not to diminish the marble, but to reveal the magnificent form hidden within. The painful process of confronting sin and its consequences, though difficult, ultimately served to refine the Israelites, shaping them into a people more aligned with God's purposes and better prepared for the daunting task of occupying the Promised Land. This intricate interplay of sin, judgment, and restoration forms a crucial part of their ongoing spiritual formation. The strategic adjustments following the Ai debacle were more than mere tactical revisions, they represented a profound shift in the Israelites' understanding of spiritual warfare. It wasn't simply about finding a weakness in the enemy's defenses, but about aligning themselves with God's overarching strategy, which often involved phases of humility and strategic repositioning. Consider the meticulous reconnaissance that preceded the successful assault on Ai. This wasn't just about gathering intelligence, it was about demonstrating a renewed attentiveness to divine guidance, a willingness to listen for subtle cues that might have been overlooked in the arrogance following Jericho. This renewed focus on detailed preparation, executed with a spirit of dependence, ensured that their renewed offensive was not merely a reaction to defeat but a calibrated, divinely sanctioned advance. Furthermore, the narrative unfolds a deeper dimension of covenantal responsibility, the establishment of distinct territories and the demarcation of sacred versus secular spaces within the Promised Land. The distribution of land among the 12 tribes, a complex process overseen by Joshua, was not merely an administrative task. It was a divinely ordained division designed to maintain spiritual distinctiveness and prevent the assimilation of foreign customs. Each tribe's allotted territory was to become a microcosm of Israel's covenantal commitment, a place where God's laws would be paramount. Now, imagine a situation where different departments within an organization are assigned specific, non-overlapping responsibilities, each crucial to the overall success of the enterprise. This division ensures clarity of purpose and prevents jurisdictional disputes, mirroring how the territorial divisions aimed to preserve the spiritual integrity of the Israelite nation by clearly delineating areas of responsibility and worship. This territorial distribution also laid the groundwork for the establishment of Levitical cities, scattered throughout the tribal lands. These cities were not merely administrative centers, they were hubs of spiritual instruction and places of refuge, serving as constant reminders of God's presence and His law. The Levites, as a priestly tribe, were set apart not for land ownership in the traditional sense, but for service within the tabernacle and for teaching the statutes and ordinances of the Lord to all Israel. This created a decentralized system of spiritual guidance, ensuring that God's word was accessible to every community, not just concentrated in a single location. Think of it like a network of specialized educational institutions, each dedicated to a particular field of knowledge, ensuring that expertise and learning are disseminated widely across a population, fostering a deep and pervasive understanding of core principles. Moreover, the narrative highlights the establishment of cities of refuge as a critical component of Israel's judicial and social structure, directly stemming from the covenantal framework. These cities were divinely appointed sanctuaries for those who had unintentionally caused death, providing a legal and physical protection against the blood feud. This provision was not an endorsement of accidental manslaughter but a demonstration of God's justice tempered with mercy, ensuring that unintentional acts did not lead to spiraling cycles of vengeance. Consider how modern legal systems incorporate provisions for mitigating circumstances and due process, aiming to deliver justice that is both fair and humane. The cities of refuge represented an ancient, divinely inspired precursor to such principles, emphasizing that even in a justice system, compassion and a structured process for determining culpability were essential elements. Building on this, the narrative implicitly addresses the ongoing challenge of maintaining spiritual vigilance in a land saturated with the religious practices of the indigenous populations. The establishment of the Levitical cities and the clear territorial divisions were proactive measures designed to insulate the Israelites from the pervasive idolatry and immoral practices that characterized Canaan. This was not merely about physical separation but about cultivating a distinct cultural and spiritual identity. Imagine a community actively working to preserve its unique heritage and traditions in the face of overwhelming external cultural influences. This requires conscious effort, deliberate education, and the reinforcement of core values through communal practices and institutions. The Israelites' efforts to establish their own spiritual infrastructure were a vital part of this ongoing process, ensuring that their covenantal commitment remained central to their national identity. Reflecting on this journey so far, we've witnessed the unfolding of a narrative that transcends mere historical conquest. The echoes of divine instruction, the profound weight of obedience, and the transformative power of unwavering faith have woven a tapestry rich with implication. As we pivot towards the final reflection, it becomes evident that the events surrounding Jericho and the subsequent establishment of Israel in the Promised Land were far more than a military campaign. They were a profound lesson in the nature of divine partnership. The very foundations of human endeavor, when aligned with a higher purpose, reveal capacities and outcomes that defy conventional understanding. The intricate interplay of human agency and divine sovereignty, so vividly portrayed, suggests a dynamic that continues to resonate, offering a paradigm for approaching challenges that might otherwise seem insurmountable. In light of these insights, the path forward becomes clearer, not in terms of predicting the final pronouncements, but in appreciating the cumulative effect of the principles illuminated. The narrative has laid bare the intricate relationship between adherence to divine will and the attainment of promised blessings, illustrating how even the most formidable obstacles can be surmounted when approached with a spirit of absolute trust. It's as if the very fabric of reality bends to accommodate a conviction that transcends the observable. The journey has illuminated the profound consequences of both faithful action and the subtle erosion of integrity, underscoring that the spiritual landscape is as critical to navigate as any physical terrain. As we move toward closure, the accumulated weight of these experiences begins to coalesce, forming a powerful testament to a covenantal dynamic that shapes destiny. Drawing these strands together, we see a compelling narrative arc that speaks to enduring truths. The initial call to an unconventional strategy, the rigorous discipline demanded, and the ultimate demonstration of divine power all converge to highlight a singular, overarching theme: the efficacy of faith-driven obedience. The complexities of establishing a new order, with its inherent challenges and the ever-present need for spiritual vigilance, have been explored not as isolated incidents, but as integral components of a larger, divinely orchestrated process. The cumulative effect of these developments creates a potent sense of anticipation, as if standing on the precipice of a profound realization, a final understanding that synthesizes the lessons learned into a timeless message. The intricate weaving of these foundational elements prepares us for a concluding perspective that seeks to encapsulate the enduring significance of this ancient account. The dust of Jericho, settled and silent, now spoke volumes, not of conquest through might, but of the profound power inherent in surrendered will. The monumental walls, once symbols of impregnable human strength, had yielded not to the force of battering rams or the cunning of siege engines, but to the unwavering obedience of a people who chose to trust in a divine strategy that defied earthly logic. This was not merely a story of military victory, it was a testament to a covenantal dynamic, a sacred agreement where human action, guided by faith, unlocked the channels of divine power. The very act of marching, of silent devotion, became the instrument of demolition, revealing a truth that resonates far beyond the ancient plains, that true strength is often found not in asserting our own will, but in aligning it with a purpose greater than ourselves. The reverberations of those fallen walls continue to echo, offering a timeless insight into the nature of overcoming seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The Israelites, having navigated the crucible of Jericho, learned a fundamental lesson that would shape their destiny, that obedience, when rooted in absolute trust, is not a passive surrender but an active participation in the unfolding of divine purpose. This was not about relinquishing agency, but about redirecting it, channeling human effort and resolve into a conduit for heavenly power. The narrative underscores that the greatest battles are often won not on the field of physical conflict, but within the heart, where doubt is silenced by conviction, and fear is replaced by a courageous adherence to the unseen. The legacy of Jericho is a perpetual reminder that the impossible often yields to those who dare to believe and to act upon that belief, even when the path seems counterintuitive. As the story concludes, it leaves us with a profound understanding of this sacred partnership. The successes and the setbacks, the triumphs and the moments of humbling correction, all serve to illuminate a consistent principle, that a life lived in alignment with divine wisdom is a life empowered to achieve far more than individual strength could ever accomplish. The true practice begins now, not in the grand pronouncements of conquest, but in the quiet, daily acts of surrendered will, in the courageous choice to walk by faith, even when the path ahead is obscured. The lessons etched in the ruins of Jericho are not confined to history. They are an invitation to embrace a similar dynamic in our own lives, to discover the extraordinary potential that lies dormant within us, waiting to be awakened by the simple, yet profound, act of obedience.